The cursor blinked mockingly at Amelia Foster as she stared at the auction website on her laptop screen. Lot 247, Lancaster Manor Hotel, Savannah, Georgia. Current bid, 50 cents. This can't be real, she whispered to herself in the cramped studio apartment that had been home for the past 3 months since the divorce. Outside her window, Chicago's October wind rattled the glass, reminding her of everything she was trying to escape. The hotel looked like something from a Gothic novel in the grainy photographs. 3 stories of weathered brick and wrought iron, Spanish moss draping the oak trees like funeral shrouds. Built in 1892, the listing said, closed since 2008. Sold as is. Buyer responsible for all back taxes and liens. Amelia had been scrolling through property auctions for weeks, feeding a fantasy that had taken root during the endless nights when sleep wouldn't come. A bed and breakfast. A literary retreat. Somewhere writers could come to find inspiration, just like she'd been trying to find for the past decade of her life. She'd saved $47,000 working as a research librarian at Northwestern University. It wasn't much, but it was everything she had left after David took half their assets and disappeared into his new life with his graduate student. The same graduate student he'd been mentoring for 2 years. The auction timer showed 3 minutes remaining. Her finger hovered over the bid button. $1. That's all it would take to outbid the current high of 50 cents. What kind of person bids 50 cents on a hotel? Someone who knows something I don't, she thought. But the photos had captured something in her, a sense of faded grandeur, of stories waiting to be told. The hotel's grand staircase curved like a question mark, and she could almost hear the whispers of guests from decades past echoing through its halls. 2 minutes. She clicked bid. $1. The page refreshed. Current high bidder, A. Foster 847. Her heart hammered against her ribs. 1 minute. The screen showed no other activity. At exactly 11:59 p.m. Central Time, the auction ended. Congratulations, flashed across the screen in cheerful yellow letters. You are the winning bidder for lot number 247. Amelia stared at the confirmation email that immediately followed. She'd just bought a hotel. A whole hotel. For $1. What the hell have I done? 3 weeks later, Amelia's Honda Civic crunched over the oyster shell driveway of Lancaster Manor Hotel as afternoon shadows stretched across the overgrown grounds. The October air in Savannah was thick with humidity and the scent of magnolia blossoms, so different from the crisp autumn she'd left behind in Chicago. The hotel was smaller than she'd imagined, but somehow more imposing. Ivy climbed the brick walls like gnarled fingers, and several second-floor shutters hung at odd angles. The wraparound porch sagged in places, but the bones of the building were solid. Good bones, her grandmother would have said. A rusted historical marker near the entrance read, Lancaster Manor Hotel, built 1892 by tobacco merchant Edmund Lancaster. Listed on the National Register of Historic Places, 1978. Amelia fumbled with the keys the bank had messengered to her, her hands shaking slightly. It wasn't just nerves. She'd been living on coffee and determination for days, driving straight through from Chicago with all her belongings crammed into her car. The front door was solid mahogany, carved with intricate palmetto leaves. It opened with a groan that seemed to echo through the empty building. The lobby took her breath away. A massive crystal chandelier hung from a coffered ceiling, some of its crystals missing, others dulled by years of neglect. But even in its diminished state, it was magnificent. The floor was black and white marble in a checkerboard pattern, and a grand staircase curved up to the second floor, its banister carved from what looked like a single piece of oak. To her left, double doors led to what must have been the dining room. To her right, a smaller door marked office. Straight ahead, past the staircase, she could see another set of doors that probably led to a back parlor or library. The air smelled of dust and old wood, but underneath it was something else. Gardenias, maybe? Or was that just her imagination? Amelia's footsteps echoed as she explored the first floor. The dining room held a dozen tables, their white tablecloths yellowed with age but still in place, as if the staff had just stepped out for a moment. Crystal glasses caught the afternoon light filtering through tall windows. The office was cramped but functional, with a roll-up desk and filing cabinets. A guest registry lay open on the counter, the last entry dated March 15, 2008. Mr. and Mrs. Robert Chen, Chicago, Illinois. She wondered what had brought the Chens to Savannah, and if they'd enjoyed their stay. But it was the library that truly captured her heart. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined 3 walls, filled with hundreds of books. A stone fireplace dominated the 4th wall, with 2 leather armchairs positioned invitingly in front of it. Persian rugs covered the hardwood floors, and tall windows looked out over a garden that had once been formal, but was now charmingly overgrown. "This is perfect," she thought. "This is where writers will come to work. They'll sit in these chairs and watch the sunset through these windows, and they'll create beautiful things." A small placard near the door caught her eye. The Ruby Lancaster Memorial Library. Donated 1963. Ruby Lancaster. Amelia made a mental note to research the hotel's history. Every good bed and breakfast needed stories to tell its guests. She spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the upper floors. 24 guest rooms in total, each with its own personality. Some had 4-poster beds. Others had writing desks positioned to catch the morning light. Room 237 had a clawfoot bathtub and a view of what must have been gorgeous gardens in their prime. By evening, she'd set up a makeshift bedroom in what had been the manager's apartment behind the front desk. It wasn't much. A Murphy bed, a tiny kitchenette, and a bathroom the size of a closet. But it was hers. As darkness fell, she sat in one of the library's leather chairs, with a cup of instant coffee and a legal pad, making lists. What needed to be fixed first? What could wait? How much money she could realistically invest before she had to start generating income? The numbers were daunting. New roof, $35,000. Plumbing updates, $15,000. Electrical work, $20,000. And that was just the basics. But she'd figure it out. She had to. The sound of rain beginning to patter against the windows was soothing, and for the first time in months, Amelia felt something that might have been hope. She was reaching for another book on hospitality management when she noticed something odd about the library's back wall. The shelves didn't quite reach the corner. There was a gap, maybe 18 inches wide, that was paneled in the same dark wood as the rest of the room. Curious, she got up to examine it more closely. The panel was seamless, but when she pressed against it, it gave slightly. She pushed harder, and with a soft click, it swung inward. Behind it was a small room, maybe 6 feet by 8 feet, with no windows. Her phone's flashlight revealed a space that looked like a private study. A small desk, a chair, and filing cabinets lined the walls, but it was what sat on the desk that made her heart stop. Stacks and stacks of cash, bundled in rubber bands, more money than she'd ever seen in one place. With trembling hands, she picked up one of the bundles, all hundreds. She counted quickly, $10,000 in this stack alone. There had to be dozens of stacks. A manila folder lay beside the money, labeled insurance policy, in spidery handwriting. Amelia opened it with shaking fingers. The folder contained photographs, black and white mostly, some in color. Pictures of people in intimate situations. People who, based on their clothing and hairstyles, were from the 1960s and 70s. Important-looking people. Men in expensive suits with women who weren't their wives. Women in compromising positions with men who wore wedding rings. Each photograph had a name written on the back, along with dates and dollar amounts. Senator Morrison, March 1967, $5,000. Judge Beaumont, August 1969, $7,500. Mayor Caldwell, January 1971, $10,000. Amelia sank into the desk chair, her mind reeling. These weren't just photographs. They were blackmail material. And based on the meticulous records, Ruby Lancaster had been very, very good at her business. She found a leather-bound ledger underneath the photos. Page after page of entries, all in the same careful handwriting. R. Morrison, continues to pay monthly, increased to $500 month after election win. B. Beaumont, threatened to expose me, reminded him of his daughter's reputation. Payment resumed. C. Caldwell, wife becoming suspicious, may need to reduce demands. The final entry was dated February 12, 1978. Growing concerned about Jay Reed's threats. He knows too much. Moving insurance to secure location until situation resolved. Amelia's phone showed 11:43 p.m. She'd been reading for over 2 hours, and she'd barely scratched the surface of Ruby Lancaster's insurance policy. Conservative estimate? There was at least $12 million in cash in this room. Maybe more. She leaned back in the chair, trying to process what she'd discovered. Ruby Lancaster hadn't just run a hotel. She'd run a blackmail operation that had lasted for decades. These photographs could have destroyed careers, Ended marriages, ruined lives, and now they belonged to her. A sound from somewhere in the hotel made her freeze. A door closing? Footsteps? She held her breath, listening. The old building settled and creaked constantly, but this had sounded different, more deliberate. "Hello," she called out, immediately feeling foolish. Who would be here at midnight? Silence. She started to relax when she heard it again. Definitely footsteps. Slow, measured, coming from the lobby. Amelia's blood turned to ice. She was alone in a remote hotel with $12 million in cash, and someone else was in the building. The footsteps stopped directly outside the library door. Then, in the silence that followed, came 3 soft knocks. Knock, knock, knock. Someone knew she was here. Someone knew about the room. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs as the knocking repeated. 3 deliberate raps that seemed to echo through the entire hotel. She fumbled for her phone's flashlight, casting wild shadows across Ruby Lancaster's hidden treasure room. Think, Amelia. Think. She could try to slip out through the library's main entrance, but whoever was knocking stood right outside that door. The secret room had no other exit. She was trapped with $12 million in blackmail money and a collection of photographs that could destroy some of Savannah's most prominent families. "Miss Foster?" A man's voice, cultured and smooth with a southern accent that spoke of old money and older secrets. "I know you're in there. I saw your car in the drive." How did he know her name? "I'm not here to hurt you," the voice continued. "My name is Jackson Reed. I represent certain interested parties regarding your recent purchase." Jackson Reed. Amelia's mind raced back to Ruby Lancaster's final ledger entry, growing concerned about Jay Reed's threats. He knows too much. This had to be connected, but that entry was from 1978, over 40 years ago. This couldn't be the same person. "Ms. Foster, I understand this situation must be overwhelming. Perhaps we could discuss this over coffee tomorrow morning. There's a lovely cafe on Bull Street." "How do you know who I am?" Amelia called out, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. A pause. Then, "Public records, my dear. Property transfers are a matter of public information. I've been monitoring this hotel for quite some time." "Why?" Another pause. Longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its polished charm. "Because my grandfather died because of what Ruby Lancaster knew, and I've spent 30 years trying to prove it." Amelia pressed her ear to the door. She couldn't hear any movement, but that didn't mean he'd left. What did she know? She asked. More than was good for her. More than was good for him. His voice grew fainter, as if he were moving away from the door. "Ms. Foster, you've stumbled into something much larger than a simple property purchase. Ruby Lancaster didn't just run a hotel. She ran an information brokerage that reached into the highest levels of Georgia society, and some of those secrets never died with her. She's been dead for 40 years. Has she?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Then who's been maintaining her files? Who's been keeping her records updated? Who knew exactly what you'd find in that room? Amelia's blood chilled. The cash had looked old, but it was neat, organized. The filing system was meticulous, as if someone had been caring for it. She'd assumed Ruby had been incredibly organized. But what if... "I'll be at Café Noir on Bull Street tomorrow at 10 a.m., Jackson Reed said. "Corner table by the window. Come alone, and bring nothing with you. If you're smart, you'll hear what I have to say before you make any decisions about your discovery." Footsteps retreated across the marble floor. A moment later, she heard the front door close with that same groaning protest. Amelia waited another 10 minutes before emerging from the secret room, clutching a baseball bat she'd found behind Ruby's desk. The lobby was empty, but she could smell cigarette smoke, expensive tobacco, not drugstore brands. She checked every window, every door, all locked. No sign of forced entry, which meant Jackson Reed had a key. The next morning dawned gray and humid, with Spanish moss swaying in a breeze that carried the scent of the Savannah River. Amelia had slept poorly, jumping at every creak and whisper of the old building. She'd spent hours going through more of Ruby Lancaster's files, and what she'd found made her stomach turn. Ruby hadn't just been a blackmailer, she'd been a puppet master, pulling strings across decades of Georgia politics. Judge appointments, construction contracts, zoning decisions, all influenced by Ruby's insurance policies. But the most disturbing discovery was a newer folder, labeled Current Assets, 2008, present. Inside were photographs taken with digital cameras, color prints of recent vintage, showing people who were very much alive, a current city councilman in a compromising position, a federal judge with gambling debts, a prominent businessman with connections to organized crime. Someone had been continuing Ruby Lancaster's work. At 9:45 a.m., Amelia walked down Bull Street toward Café Noir, her nerves stretched taut as piano wire. She'd hidden the most damning photographs and a small stack of cash in her car's spare tire, but left most of the evidence in the secret room. If something happened to her, at least the police would find it eventually. Café Noir occupied the ground floor of a restored Victorian mansion, its outdoor seating area shaded by ancient live oaks. She spotted Jackson Reed immediately. Late 50s, silver hair, expensive suit that probably cost more than her car. He looked like he'd stepped out of a Southern living spread on Gentlemen Lawyers. "Ms. Foster." He rose as she approached, extending a manicured hand. "Thank you for coming." Up close, she could see the resemblance to someone in Ruby's photographs. The same sharp cheekbones, the same piercing blue eyes. But those photos had been labeled J. Reed, 1967. "You look like him," she said without thinking. His smile was razor thin. "My grandfather, yes, James Reed. Ruby Lancaster destroyed his life, and then she had him killed." A waitress appeared, and Jackson ordered chicory coffee and beignets for both of them without asking Amelia's preference. Old Southern habit. Men making decisions for women. "Tell me about your grandfather," Amelia said. "He was a businessman, owned textile mills across Georgia in the 1960s, employed thousands of people, contributed to churches and charities. A pillar of the community." Jackson's voice carried the practiced cadence of a story told many times. "Ruby Lancaster seduced him during a business trip to Savannah in 1967. She photographed him in a compromised position. Then she bled him dry for 10 years. The photographs I found suggest it was consensual. My grandfather was a married man with 3 children. Ruby Lancaster was a professional predator who targeted wealthy, powerful men. She ruined dozens of lives over 3 decades. Their coffee arrived, thick and dark as motor oil. Amelia wrapped her hands around the cup, needing the warmth despite the humid morning. "What happened to him?" "He started fighting back in 1977, hired private investigators, threatened to expose her entire operation. She didn't like that." Jackson's eyes hardened. On February 15, 1978, his car went off the bridge over the Ogeechee River. Investigators ruled it an accident, but the skid marks told a different story. "You think Ruby had him killed?" "I know she did, but I could never prove it. She disappeared 3 months later. Some say she died, others that she fled to South America. The hotel closed, and everyone assumed her blackmail operation died with her." Amelia thought of the newer photographs, the updated files. What if it didn't? Jackson leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "That's what I've been trying to determine for 30 years. Ruby Lancaster built something bigger than herself, a network of information and influence that could operate independently, and I believe someone has been maintaining it, keeping it alive. Who? That's what I need your help to discover." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a thick manila envelope. "There are things about that hotel you need to know. Things about Ruby Lancaster that didn't make it into any official records." Amelia opened the envelope. Inside were photocopies of police reports, newspaper clippings, and what looked like private investigator files dating back to the 1960s. The first document made her hands shake. Savannah Morning News, March 18, 1978. Hotel owner missing, presumed dead. Police are investigating the disappearance of Ruby Lancaster. 45, owner of the Lancaster Manor Hotel on Victory Drive. Lancaster was last seen on March 15th, leaving the hotel in the company of an unidentified man. Her car was found abandoned at Tybee Island 3 days later. Lancaster was known for her extensive social connections and was reportedly working on a book about Savannah's social history at the time of her disappearance. The next document was a handwritten letter, dated March 14, 1978, one day before Ruby disappeared. "My dearest Iris, if you're reading this, then my worst fears have come true. James Reed's family has been making threats, and I believe they intend to harm me. I've taken precautions to protect our work. Everything is secure, and the operation can continue without me if necessary. You know what must be done. The families listed in the red file must continue to pay. Their secrets are our security, and our security is their continued cooperation. Remember, Trust no one outside the family. The Reeds have connections everywhere, and they won't stop until they've destroyed everything we've built. All my love, Ruby P.S. The spare key is where we agreed. Give me a week, then proceed as planned. Amelia looked up to find Jackson watching her intently. Who is Iris? Iris Beaumont, Ruby's protege. Disappeared the same night Ruby did. He paused. She was 17 years old. The implications hit Amelia like a physical blow. You think she's still alive? Still running the operation? Iris would be in her 60s now. And if she's been maintaining Ruby's network for 40 years, she's become far more dangerous than Ruby ever was. Jackson's voice was grim. Ms. Foster, you haven't just inherited a hotel. You've inherited a target. Before Amelia could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You have something that belongs to me. Return it, or you'll join Ruby Lancaster at the bottom of the river. Jackson saw her face go white. What is it? With shaking hands, she showed him the message. He stood abruptly, throwing cash on the table. We need to get you out of here. Now. Wait. I need to go back to the hotel. The hotel is compromised. Has been since the day you bought it. He grabbed her arm, his grip surprisingly strong. Ms. Foster, Iris Beaumont has been waiting 40 years for someone to find Ruby's files. She's not going to let you walk away with them. As if to emphasize his point, Amelia's phone buzzed again. The beautiful thing about blackmail, dear, is that everyone has secrets, even librarians from Chicago. What would David think about your college indiscretions? 1 hour? Come alone. The blood drained from Amelia's face. Her college indiscretions. A drunk driving arrest she'd managed to keep sealed. A brief affair with a married professor that had ended her engagement to her first boyfriend. Things she'd never told David. Things that could destroy her reputation, her chance at a new life. Iris Beaumont had done her homework. Jackson saw her expression. What secrets does she have on you? Nothing that should matter anymore, but Amelia's voice trailed off. In a small town like this, where she was trying to build a new business, reputation was everything. She's good, Jackson said grimly. 40 years of practice. She knows exactly which pressure points to push. Another text. Lancaster Manor Hotel. Ruby's room. 1 hour or everyone in Chicago learns about Professor Martinez and the plagiarism cover-up. Amelia's hands went numb. Professor Martinez had been her thesis advisor, and she'd helped him cover up the fact that he'd stolen research from a graduate student. The scandal would have ended both their careers if it had come out. But how could Iris possibly know about that? I have to go, she whispered. It's a trap. She knows things she shouldn't know. About my life in Chicago. About things I never told anyone. Amelia stood on unsteady legs. I can't let her destroy everything I'm trying to build here. Jackson caught her wrist as she turned to leave. If you go back to that hotel, you won't leave alive. Iris Beaumont has killed before, and she'll kill again to protect Ruby's legacy. Then what do you suggest? For the first time since she'd met him, Jackson Reed smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. We give her exactly what she wants, he said, and then we destroy her the same way she destroyed my grandfather. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face went pale. What is it? Amelia asked. He showed her the screen. A photograph, obviously taken this morning, showing the two of them sitting at this very table. The message underneath was simple. Hello, Jackson. Still trying to avenge dear old granddaddy? Bring the girl. 1 hour. Don't disappoint me again. Amelia's mind reeled. Again? Jackson's composed facade cracked, revealing something desperate underneath. She's been playing with me for 30 years. Every time I get close to the truth, she stays one step ahead. She's been watching me, manipulating me, using me. Using you for what? To find Ruby's files. I've been her bloodhound, tracking down every lead, every connection, every piece of the puzzle. And now, he looked at her with something that might have been pity. Now she has what she's been waiting for all these years. Someone who actually found the treasure room. Amelia felt the trap closing around her. The auction. The hotel being sold for 50 cents. That wasn't coincidence, was it? Nothing about Iris Beaumont is coincidence. Jackson stood, straightening his tie with hands that shook slightly. She's been orchestrating this for months, maybe years. Making sure the right person found that hotel. The right person who would be curious enough to explore. Naive enough to get in over their head. The right person who could be controlled. Exactly. He met her eyes. The question is, Ms. Foster, Are you going to let her control you? Or are we going to finally end this? Amelia's phone buzzed one final time. 45 minutes now. Don't keep an old lady waiting. P.S. Jackson, bring the item we discussed. You know the one. Jackson cursed under his breath, a vulgarity that seemed shockingly out of place coming from his refined lips. What item? Amelia demanded. The one thing Iris has wanted more than Ruby's files. More than the money. More than anything. His voice was barely a whisper. Ruby Lancaster's original client list from 1963 to 1967. The names of every person she ever blackmailed, every secret she ever learned, every crime she helped cover up. Where is it? Jackson's smile was bitter. Hidden in the one place Iris could never get to it. The one place she's been afraid to look for 40 years. Where? Bonaventure Cemetery stretched out before them like a city of the dead, its marble angels and weathered headstones creating a maze of shadows under the afternoon sun. Spanish moss hung from ancient oaks like tattered curtains, and the silence was broken only by the distant sound of the Wilmington River lapping against the shore. Jackson Reed parked his Mercedes beside the cemetery's main gate, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone white. "This is insane," Amelia said for the third time since they'd left the cafe. "We're about to dig up a grave based on the word of a man whose grandfather was being blackmailed 40 years ago. You have a better idea." Jackson's voice was strained. "In 30 minutes, we're supposed to meet a woman who's been murdering people for 4 decades. A woman who somehow knows your deepest secrets and has been pulling my strings like a marionette since I was in college." Amelia checked her phone. 27 minutes until their appointment at Lancaster Manor. No new messages from Iris, which somehow felt more ominous than the threats. "How do you even know Ruby's buried here?" "Because I've been visiting her grave for 30 years. Jackson opened the car door, the October heat hitting them like a wall despite the late afternoon hour. "Every year on the anniversary of my grandfather's death, leaving flowers, leaving threats, leaving promises that I'd expose her eventually." He popped the trunk and removed a small duffel bag. Inside, Amelia glimpsed a collapsible shovel, a crowbar, and what looked like professional grave-digging equipment. "Jesus, Jackson, how long have you been planning this?" "Since I was 25 years old and found my grandfather's suicide note." His voice was flat, emotionless. The note the police never saw. The one where he explained exactly what Ruby Lancaster had done to him, and exactly where she'd hidden the evidence that could destroy her. They walked through the cemetery gates, Jackson leading with the confidence of someone who'd made this journey many times. Bonaventure was famous for its Gothic beauty. Tourists came from around the world to see the haunting sculptures and elaborate mausoleums that had inspired countless Southern Gothic novels. But today, the beauty felt sinister. Every shadow could hide a watcher. Every rustle in the Spanish moss could signal danger. "There," Jackson pointed to a simple granite headstone near the river's edge. "Ruby Evangeline Lancaster, 1933 to 1978. She took her secrets to the grave." The irony of the epitaph wasn't lost on Amelia. Who chose those words? According to the cemetery records, her estate executor, one Iris Beaumont. Jackson's smile was grim. Even then, she was playing games. Amelia knelt beside the grave, running her fingers over the weathered stone. "Your grandfather's suicide note. What exactly did it say?" Jackson set down the duffel bag and glanced around the cemetery. They were alone except for a groundskeeper working several hundred yards away, too far to see what they were doing. "Ruby didn't just blackmail her victims," he said quietly. "She made them complicit. My grandfather wasn't just paying to keep his affair secret. He was paying to keep quiet about the murders." "Murders?" "Ruby Lancaster killed at least 6 people between 1965 and 1978. Politicians who tried to expose her. Business rivals who got too close to her operation. A newspaper reporter who was investigating the connections between her hotel guests, and a series of suspicious deaths." Jackson began assembling the collapsible shovel. "My grandfather helped her cover up 3 of those murders." Amelia's blood chilled. "How?" "Money. Influence. He owned construction companies that could make bodies disappear, textile mills that employed half the county, and could provide alibis for anyone Ruby needed protected." Jackson's voice was barely a whisper. She didn't just have photographs of him with another woman. She had evidence that he'd helped her kill Judge Harold Morrison. The name hit Amelia like a physical blow. Morrison? As in, Senator Robert Morrison's father. the judge whose murder conviction of a prominent black civil rights leader was overturned posthumously in 1985. Jackson began digging, his movements practiced and efficient. Turns out Judge Morrison was getting ready to expose Ruby's operation, so she had him killed and made it look like a robbery gone wrong. And your grandfather helped? Provided the construction crew that buried the real evidence, gave false testimony about Ruby's whereabouts the night of the murder, even helped frame an innocent man for the crime. Jackson's shovel hit something hard. My grandfather lived with that guilt for 10 years before he couldn't take it anymore. Amelia's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. TikTok, darling. Hope you're not getting distracted by family history. 20 minutes. Another message followed immediately. P.S. Beautiful day for a cemetery visit, isn't it? Send my regards to Ruby. Amelia spun around, scanning the cemetery. She's watching us. She's been watching me for 30 years. Jackson continued digging. There. He'd uncovered the corner of what looked like a metal box, about the size of a briefcase. With the crowbar, he pried it free from the earth and lifted it out. The box was stainless steel, sealed with what appeared to be a combination lock. But as Jackson brushed away the dirt, Amelia could see that the lock had been cut. Recently, from the look of the fresh scratches on the metal. Someone's been here before us, she whispered. Jackson opened the box. Inside was a waterproof pouch containing a single piece of paper and a small leather journal. The paper was a typewritten letter dated March 14th, 1978, the same date as the letter to Iris that Jackson had shown her at the cafe. To whoever finds this, if you're reading these words, then Iris has finally grown tired of waiting and decided to take what's mine. I always knew this day would come. The student eventually surpasses the teacher, after all. What you found in my hotel was just the tip of the iceberg. The real treasure isn't money. It's information. And the most dangerous information is in the book you're holding now. Every politician, every judge, every businessman who's held power in Georgia for the past 50 years has a file in that book. Not just the ones I blackmailed, but their children, their children's children. Iris has been expanding the operation, recruiting new targets, building something I never imagined. She thinks she's been in control, but she's wrong. I've been watching her, documenting her crimes, waiting for the right moment to bring her down. That moment is now. The evidence you need to destroy her is hidden where she'll never think to look, in the place she fears most. Find the Midnight Garden. Find the truth. Ruby Lancaster Jackson stared at the letter, his face pale. The Midnight Garden. I've never heard of it. Amelia opened the leather journal. The pages were filled with Ruby's careful handwriting, but these weren't blackmail records. These were confessions. March 1st, 1978. Iris killed the newspaper reporter today. Made it look like a car accident, just like I taught her. But she enjoyed it too much. There was something in her eyes. March 5th, 1978. She's recruiting others. Young women mostly. Orphans, runaways, girls with nothing to lose. She's building an army. March 10th, 1978. I tried to stop her today. Told her we had enough money, enough power. She laughed at me. Said I was weak. Said the real game was just beginning. March 12th, 1978. She knows I'm planning to expose her. I can see it in her eyes. I have maybe days before she makes her move. March 14th, 1978. This is my final entry. If something happens to me, remember this. Iris Beaumont is not the scared teenager I took in 6 years ago. She's become something else, something dangerous, and she won't stop until she controls everyone and everything in this state. The Midnight Garden was our first operation together, a private club where powerful men came to indulge their darkest desires. I thought I was teaching her about blackmail, about leverage. I was really teaching her about power, and she learned the lesson too well. God forgive me for what I created. Amelia's hands were shaking as she closed the journal. Jackson, we need to get out of here. Now. Where's the Midnight Garden? He asked, still staring at the letter. I don't know, but... A slow clap echoed across the cemetery. Both of them spun toward the sound. Iris Beaumont stood about 50 feet away, near a massive oak tree draped with Spanish moss. She was smaller than Amelia had expected, a petite woman in her early 60s with silver hair and clothes that spoke of old money and older secrets. She could have been someone's grandmother, if not for her eyes. Her eyes were absolutely cold. Ruby always was dramatic, Iris said, walking toward them with unhurried steps. hiding letters in graves, making everything so mysterious. I suppose that's what happens when you spend too many years reading Gothic novels. Jackson straightened, his hand moving toward the crowbar. Iris. Hello, Jackson. Still playing the avenging grandson, I see. How exhausting that must be. Her voice carried a soft southern accent, but underneath it was something sharp as broken glass. And you must be Ms. Foster. You're much prettier than your photographs suggest. What do you want? Amelia asked, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Oh, my dear, I think you know exactly what I want. Iris stopped about 10 feet away, close enough to talk comfortably, far enough to run if necessary. The same thing I've wanted for 40 years. Complete control. The files in the hotel are just the beginning, Iris finished. Ruby was small-minded. She thought blackmail was about money, but money is just a tool. Real power comes from knowing that you can destroy anyone at any time, for any reason. Jackson took a step forward. You killed my grandfather. Your grandfather killed himself, Iris corrected. I simply encouraged the decision. He was weak, Jackson. Guilt-ridden. Useless. Men like that have no place in the new world I'm building. The new world? Iris smiled, and the expression was somehow more terrifying than any threat could have been. Did you really think this was just about Georgia? About some old hotel and a few corrupt politicians? She laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. I've been building networks for 40 years. Washington, New York, Los Angeles. Every major city in America has a midnight garden now. Every powerful person has a file. Every secret has a price. Amelia felt the world tilting around her. You're talking about a national conspiracy. I'm talking about evolution, darling. Democracy is messy, inefficient. People make poor choices when left to their own devices. But when the right people have the right information about everyone else. Iris shrugged delicately. Well, suddenly everyone makes much better choices. You're insane. I'm practical. Iris reached into her purse and withdrew a small silver revolver, the kind that might have belonged to a Southern belle protecting her honor. Now, I believe you have something that belongs to me. Jackson stepped protectively in front of Amelia. The files are still at the hotel. Not the files, dear boy. The journal. Ruby's final confession. Iris's eyes fixed on the leather book in Amelia's hands. I've been looking for that particular item for 40 years. It contains some rather unflattering descriptions of my early work, along with evidence that you're a serial killer. Serial killer is such an ugly phrase. I prefer social architect. Iris's grip on the gun never wavered. Now, Ms. Foster, if you'd be so kind as to hand over the journal, we can conclude our business. And then what? You kill us both? Jackson, certainly. He's been a thorn in my side for far too long. But you, my dear, Iris tilted her head, considering. You have potential. You're intelligent, resourceful, desperate for a new start. I could use someone like you. To do what? To run the operation, of course. I'm getting old, and this work requires someone with energy, someone who understands modern technology. Iris's smile was predatory. Ruby's hotel was just the testing ground. I've been watching you for months, Ms. Foster. Your divorce, your financial troubles, your willingness to take risks. You're exactly what I need. Amelia's mind raced. Keep her talking. Buy time. Think of a way out. What about the Midnight Garden? Ruby's journal mentions it. For the first time, Iris's composed facade cracked slightly. Ruby always was too sentimental. The Midnight Garden was a learning experience. My first solo project. Where is it? Where it's always been. Hidden in plain sight. Iris's voice grew colder. But that's not your concern anymore. The journal, Ms. Foster. Now. Jackson tensed, and Amelia could see him calculating distances. The crowbar was at his feet, but Iris was too far away. The gun would cut him down before he could reach her. If I give you the journal, Amelia said slowly, what guarantee do I have that you won't kill me anyway? You don't, Iris said simply. But you do have my word that I'll make it quick. Ruby trained me well, but she never taught me to enjoy the violence. That was something I learned on my own. You're enjoying this. Immensely. Iris checked her watch. An elegant Cartier that probably cost more than Amelia's car. You have 10 seconds to decide, my dear. Give me the journal and accept my offer, or watch your friend die and then join him. 5 seconds. Amelia looked at Jackson, seeing the resignation in his eyes. He'd been fighting this battle for 30 years, and they both knew how it was going to end. 3 seconds. She held out the journal. 2 seconds. Iris stepped forward, reaching for the book. 1. The gunshot echoed across the cemetery like thunder, sending birds exploding from the oak trees in a chaos of wings and frightened cries. But Iris Beaumont was the one who fell, a look of absolute surprise on her face as blood bloomed across her white blouse. Behind her, a figure emerged from the Spanish moss, a woman in her 70s, with steel gray hair and eyes like chips of flint. "Hello, Iris," the woman said, lowering a smoking pistol. "I've been waiting 40 years to do that." Jackson stared in shock. "Who?" The woman smiled, and suddenly Amelia could see the resemblance to the photographs in Ruby's files. The same bone structure, the same intelligent eyes, just older, weathered by decades of hiding. The silence that followed Ruby Lancaster's revelation stretched across Bonaventure Cemetery like a held breath. Iris Beaumont lay motionless among the fallen oak leaves, her silver hair fanned out like a halo, the expensive revolver glinting in the afternoon sun just inches from her lifeless fingers. Ruby kept her own gun trained on the body, as if she expected Iris to rise like some gothic specter and continue their 4-decade war. "You're supposed to be dead," Jackson whispered, his voice cracking like a teenager's. "Death," Ruby said without taking her eyes off Iris, "is remarkably easy to fake when you have the right connections. And I had 40 years of blackmail material to cash in." Amelia found her voice first. "Who's buried in your grave?" "A Jane Doe from the Savannah morgue. Homeless woman, died of exposure the same week I disappeared. The coroner owed me several favors." Ruby finally looked at them, and Amelia was struck by how much the woman had aged beyond her years. Deep lines etched her face, and her hands showed the tremor of someone who'd lived with constant stress for decades. "I switched our dental records, burned her fingerprints, and let Iris think she'd won." "But why?" Jackson demanded. "Why fake your death? Why let everyone think—" "Because I realized what I'd created in that girl." Ruby's voice turned bitter. "I thought I was teaching Iris how to survive in a man's world, how to use their weaknesses against them. Instead, I created a monster." She gestured toward Iris's body with her gun. "This woman killed 17 people over the past 40 years. 17 that I know of. Politicians who tried to expose her, journalists who got too close, even some of her own operatives when they became liabilities." Amelia's legs felt weak. She sank onto a nearby bench, trying to process the magnitude of what Ruby was telling them. "You've been watching her for 40 years? Hunting her," Ruby corrected. "But she was always too smart, too careful. She learned everything I taught her and improved on it. While I was building a regional blackmail operation, she was creating a national conspiracy. The Midnight Garden," Jackson said. Ruby's face went pale. "She told you about that?" "She mentioned it. Said there were midnight gardens in every major city now." "Dear God." Ruby leaned against the oak tree, suddenly looking every one of her 90 years. "The Midnight Garden was my greatest shame. A private club I started in 1972, hidden in the basement of the hotel. Wealthy men could come there to indulge certain appetites. I told myself I was just documenting their activities for leverage, but really I was enabling them." "What kind of activities?" Amelia asked, though she was afraid she already knew. "The kind that destroy lives," Ruby said simply. "Iris was 17 when she first saw what happened in that basement. I thought she was horrified, like any normal person would be. Instead, she was fascinated." Ruby walked over to Iris's body and knelt beside it, checking for a pulse. Satisfied that the woman was truly dead, she stood and continued her story. Within 6 months, Iris was running the garden herself, making suggestions about how to improve the experience, recruiting other young women to work there. I tried to shut it down in 1977, but by then it was too late. She had too much power, too many connections. "So you faked your death," Jackson said. "I faked my death, left her everything she thought she wanted, and started building a case against her from the shadows." Ruby pulled a manila folder from her jacket. 40 years of evidence. Photographs, financial records, witness statements from the few survivors of her operations. Jackson took the folder with shaking hands. Inside were hundreds of documents. Bank transfers, death certificates, medical reports, surveillance photos. All meticulously organized, all pointing to a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of American government. Senator Morrison, Jackson read aloud. Representative Caldwell, Judge Beaumont, Chief Justice Hamilton. His voice trailed off as he recognized name after name. These are all current officials, all controlled by Iris, Ruby confirmed. She didn't just continue my work, she systematized it, created a network of blackmail and corruption that spans the entire country. Every major political decision of the past 20 years has been influenced by her organization. Amelia thought of the newer files she'd found in the secret room, the digital photographs and updated records. How many people work for her? At last count, over 300 operatives in 47 states, plus countless politicians, judges, and business leaders who do what she tells them, because she owns their secrets. Ruby's voice was grim. She built exactly what she always dreamed of, a shadow government that controls everything while appearing to control nothing. And now she's dead, Jackson said. Now she's dead, Ruby agreed. But her organization isn't. They'll regroup, choose a new leader, continue the work. Unless what? Ruby looked at Amelia with eyes that held 4 decades of regret. Unless someone with access to all of Iris's files, someone she never suspected, someone who inherited the perfect base of operations, decides to bring the whole thing down. The weight of what Ruby was suggesting hit Amelia like a physical blow. You want me to destroy her network. I want you to finish what I started 40 years ago. Ruby pulled out a cell phone, a surprisingly modern device for a woman her age. I've been documenting everything, but I'm dying, Ms. Foster. Cancer. 6 months, maybe less. This was my last chance to stop Iris, and now I need someone to carry on the work. Why me? Because you found the files. Because you're smart enough to understand what they mean. Because you're desperate enough to take the risk. Ruby's smile was sad. And because Iris chose you. She spent months setting up that auction, making sure you'd be the one to buy the hotel. She saw something in you that made her think you could be molded into her successor. Jackson was still flipping through the evidence folder. Ruby, some of these photographs, they show children. Ruby closed her eyes. The worst part of Iris's operation. She recruited teenage girls from foster homes, runaways, girls who wouldn't be missed. Trained them to become operatives, to seduce and compromise targets. Many of them didn't survive the training. We have to turn this over to the FBI, Amelia said. The FBI has been compromised for 20 years, Ruby replied. Half the Bureau's senior leadership has files in Iris's collection. The moment you walk into a federal building with this evidence, you'll be dead within hours. Then what do you suggest? Ruby pulled a set of keys from her pocket and handed them to Amelia. These open safety deposit boxes in 12 different banks across the Southeast. Each box contains copies of everything. The files, the photographs, the financial records. Enough evidence to destroy everyone in Iris's network. And you want me to what? Mail them to newspapers? I want you to be smart about it. Iris built her power slowly, carefully. You'll have to dismantle it the same way. Ruby pulled out a business card and handed it to Jackson. This man can help you. He's been investigating Iris's organization for 15 years, but he's never had access to the inner workings. Jackson read the card aloud. Special Agent Marcus Webb, Department of Justice, Public Integrity Section. Webb is clean, Ruby assured them. I've been feeding him information for years, but never enough to act on. With Iris's complete files, he can build cases that will topple the entire network. Amelia's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Ruby Lancaster is alive. Iris Beaumont is dead. If you're reading this message, then the transition of power has begun. You have 48 hours to decide. Lead the organization, or watch it destroy you. Choose wisely. The council. Ruby saw Amelia's face go white. What is it? Amelia showed her the message. Ruby cursed. A surprisingly vulgar word coming from the elderly Southern woman. The council, she said grimly. Iris's inner circle. I'd hoped we had more time before they realized what happened. How many people are in this council? Jackson asked. 5. All women. All trained by Iris personally. All absolutely ruthless. Ruby began walking quickly toward the cemetery exit. We need to get to the hotel. Now. Why? Because the files you found are just the beginning. Iris's real archive, the one with everything on every target, every operative, every operation, is hidden somewhere in that building. The council will tear the place apart to find it. They reached Ruby's car, a nondescript sedan that looked like it belonged to someone's grandmother. As they drove through Savannah's historic district, Ruby continued her briefing. The council consists of 5 women, each running operations in different regions. Sarah Chen covers the West Coast, Elena Rodriguez handles the Southwest, Victoria Hamilton runs the Midwest, Dr. Margaret Cross controls the Northeast, and Ruby paused. Ashley Morrison manages the Southeast from a base in Atlanta. Jackson went rigid. Morrison? Senator Morrison's daughter. She joined Iris's organization 10 years ago, right after law school. Brilliant, beautiful, and absolutely without conscience. Ruby glanced at him in the rearview mirror. She's also been feeding Iris information about your investigation for years. That's impossible. You hired a private detective named Carson Mills in 2019 to help track down leads about Iris. Mills has been reporting to Ashley Morrison since 2015. Ruby's voice was gentle but firm. Jackson, they've been playing you from the beginning. Every move you made, every lead you followed, every piece of evidence you uncovered, they knew about it. Jackson slumped in his seat, the weight of 30 years of manipulation finally crushing him. I've been helping them this whole time. You've been a stalking horse, Ruby confirmed, leading them to resources they couldn't find on their own, validating their security measures, occasionally serving as a useful distraction. They turned onto Victory Drive, and Lancaster Manor Hotel came into view. Even from a distance, Amelia could see that something was wrong. The front door hung open, and there were cars in the driveway that didn't belong to any of them. Too late, Ruby muttered, pulling over several blocks away. They're already here. Through binoculars, they could see figures moving through the hotel's windows. At least 6 people, all dressed in black, all moving with military precision. Professional operatives, Ruby observed. The council isn't taking any chances. Amelia's phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from an unknown number. Ruby nodded and she answered. Ms. Foster. The voice was crisp, professional, with a slight southern accent. My name is Ashley Morrison. I believe you have something that belongs to us. The files belong to me. I bought the hotel legally. Legal ownership and practical control are 2 very different things, darling. You've stumbled into a situation far beyond your comprehension. Ashley's voice remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath. We're prepared to make you a very generous offer for the return of all materials relating to our organization. What kind of offer? $10 million, wired to any account you specify. Plus a new identity, relocation assistance, and a guarantee of safety for the rest of your natural life. Ruby was shaking her head vigorously, but Amelia kept the conversation going. And if I refuse? Then you'll join Iris Beaumont in whatever afterlife awaits unrepentant sinners. The pleasantness vanished from Ashley's voice. We know Ruby Lancaster is with you. We know Jackson Reed has been playing amateur detective for 3 decades. We know you're all currently parked 2 blocks from the hotel in a gray Honda Civic. Amelia's blood chilled. She looked around but couldn't see anyone watching them. You have exactly 1 hour to bring us everything, Ashley continued. Ruby's evidence files, Iris's archives, any copies you may have made. In exchange, we'll allow you to live. Refuse, and we'll start with your ex-husband in Chicago. David Martinez, isn't it? Such a shame if something were to happen to him just as he's starting his new life with that graduate student. The line went dead. Ruby was already starting the car. We need to run, now. Wait, Amelia said. They mentioned Iris's archives, the real ones hidden in the hotel. If we can get to those first, it's suicide, Jackson protested. You heard her. They have the place surrounded. They have the place surrounded from the outside, Amelia corrected. But I know something they don't. Ruby turned to look at her. What? There's another way into the hotel. Ruby, when you built the Midnight Garden in the basement, did you include an emergency exit? Ruby's eyes widened with understanding. The tunnel. I'd forgotten about the tunnel. What tunnel? Jackson demanded. During Prohibition, the hotel's basement was connected to the Savannah River by a smuggling tunnel, Ruby explained. I had it restored in the 1970s as an escape route in case the authorities ever raided the garden. Does the council know about it? Iris knew, but she never shared operational details with the council. It was one of her security measures. Ruby's smile was grim. They might search for days before finding that tunnel. So we use it to get in, find the real archives, and get out before they know we're there, Amelia said. And then what? Jackson asked. Even if we get the files, Ashley Morrison has resources we can't match. Money, personnel, political connections. How do we fight that? Ruby pulled out her cell phone again. By doing what Iris never expected anyone to be smart enough to do, she dialed a number and waited. Agent Webb, this is your anonymous source. Yes, the one who's been feeding you information about government corruption for 15 years. I'm ready to come in from the cold. She paused, listening. No, I can't come to your office, but I can give you something better than witness testimony. I can give you documentary evidence of a conspiracy that reaches into the highest levels of government. Everything you need to bring down the most dangerous criminal organization in American history. Another pause. Tonight, midnight, Forsyth Park, by the fountain. Come alone and bring a very large evidence bag. Ruby hung up and looked at both of them. In 6 hours, Agent Webb will have everything he needs to destroy the Council's network. But first, we need to make sure we survive long enough to give it to him. The tunnel entrance is near the river, she continued. If we can reach it without being spotted, we can get into the hotel, retrieve Iris's archives, and be gone before the Council realizes what happened. And if we're caught? Ruby checked her pistol, ensuring it was fully loaded. Then we make sure we take as many of them with us as possible. As they drove toward the Savannah River, Amelia's phone buzzed one final time. A message from Ashley Morrison. 55 minutes remaining. Choose life, Ms. Foster. It's so much more pleasant than the alternative. But attached to the message was a photograph that made Amelia's blood freeze. It showed David, her ex-husband, sitting in his Chicago apartment, completely unaware that he was being watched. A red laser dot was clearly visible on his chest. "Tick-tock," read the final message. Ruby saw her expression in the rearview mirror. "What is it?" "They have a sniper on David," Amelia whispered. The Prohibition-era tunnel smelled of river water and decades of decay. Amelia followed Ruby's flickering flashlight through the narrow passage, trying not to think about the tons of earth and brick above their heads, or the fact that this tunnel hadn't been used in over 40 years. Jackson brought up the rear. His breathing labored in the confined space. None of them had spoken since they'd slipped into the tunnel entrance hidden among the cypress roots along the Savannah River. Ashley Morrison's deadline hung over them like a sword. 37 minutes to find Iris's archives and escape before the Council started killing people. "How much farther?" Amelia whispered. "Almost there," Ruby replied, her voice muffled by the stone walls. "The tunnel comes up in the hotel's original wine cellar, which is adjacent to the basement where the Midnight Garden was located." They climbed a rusted iron ladder that emerged behind a false wall in what looked like a storage room. Ruby pressed her ear to the door, listening for movement in the hotel above. "I can hear them," she whispered. "At least 4 people on the first floor, moving systematically through the rooms. They're being thorough." "Do they know about the basement?" Jackson asked. "They'll find it eventually, but the entrance is hidden behind the furnace. We might have 20 minutes before they work their way down there." Ruby led them through a maze of basement corridors that seemed to honeycomb the foundation of the old hotel. Amelia realized that Lancaster Manor was built like an iceberg. What she'd seen above ground was only a fraction of the actual structure. Here, Ruby stopped at what looked like a blank wall. She pressed a sequence of bricks, and a section swung inward, revealing a room that took Amelia's breath away. The Midnight Garden. Even after 30 years of abandonment, the space retained an air of sinister elegance. Red velvet curtains hung from the walls, now faded and moth-eaten. A circular bar dominated the center of the room, surrounded by intimate seating areas that had once hosted the powerful men of Georgia's political and business elite. But it was the walls that made Amelia's skin crawl. Hundreds of photographs were mounted in frames, pictures of the garden's activities over the years. Men she recognized from history books, from newspaper headlines, from current political coverage, all caught in moments of weakness, all perfectly documented for future leverage. "Dear God," Jackson breathed. "How many people did you control?" "Too many," Ruby said quietly. "But Iris expanded far beyond what I ever imagined. Her archive is through here." She led them to what appeared to be a wine rack, but when she pulled a specific bottle, the entire rack swung away to reveal a modern office space that looked like something from a tech company. Banks of servers hummed quietly, their LED lights blinking in the darkness. Multiple computer workstations were arranged around the room, each with multiple monitors and sophisticated encryption hardware. "Welcome to the nerve center of the most successful criminal conspiracy in American history," Ruby said grimly. Amelia approached one of the workstations. The monitors were in sleep mode, but when she moved the mouse, they came to life, displaying a login screen with biometric scanners. "How do we get in?" "We don't need to," Ruby said. She walked to a filing cabinet and withdrew a set of backup drives. Iris was paranoid about digital security, but she was old-fashioned enough to keep physical backups of everything. These drives contain complete files on every target, every operative, every operation. Jackson was examining the servers. There must be petabytes of data here. Surveillance footage, financial records, communications intercepts. 40 years of intelligence gathering, Ruby confirmed. Iris had operatives in law enforcement, intelligence agencies, major corporations. She knew about terrorist attacks before they happened, economic crashes before they occurred, political scandals before they broke, and she used that information to position herself and her allies advantageously. A sound from above made them all freeze. Heavy footsteps, multiple sets, moving with military precision. "They've found the basement entrance," Ruby whispered. Amelia grabbed the backup drives. "How do we get out?" "The tunnel's our only option, but they might have found it by now." Ruby checked her pistol. "We need to move fast." They made it halfway across the midnight garden before the lights came on. "Stop right there." The voice belonged to a woman in her 30s with short blonde hair and the kind of physical conditioning that spoke of serious military training. She held a suppressed pistol with the casual competence of someone who'd used it many times before. "Dr. Margaret Cross, I presume," Ruby said calmly. "Hello, Ruby. You look remarkably good for a dead woman." Margaret stepped into the room, followed by two men in tactical gear. "Though I suppose 40 years of hiding would age anyone. Where's Ashley Morrison? Coordinating our Chicago operation. Your ex-husband sends his regards, Miss Foster. Such a shame he won't live to see tomorrow's sunrise." Amelia's grip tightened on the backup drives. "You bastards." "Practical people making practical decisions," Margaret corrected. "Iris built something beautiful here. A system that ensures the right people make the right choices at the right times. We're not going to let you destroy that because of some misguided sense of justice. You're talking about enslaving the entire American political system," Jackson said. "We're talking about managing it," Margaret replied. "Democracy is chaos, Mr. Reed. Too many variables, too many irrational actors. Our system provides stability, predictability, the right outcomes." "For whom?" "For everyone who matters." Margaret's smile was cold. "Now, Ms. Foster, those drives you're holding contain 40 years of our organization's work. I'll give you one chance to hand them over peacefully. And if I refuse, then we'll take them from your corpse and have a lovely conversation with your ex-husband about the price of defiance." Ruby stepped forward slightly, positioning herself between Margaret and Amelia. "You know, Margaret, I always wondered what happened to that scared little girl Iris recruited from the Atlanta foster system in 1985. Margaret's composure cracked slightly. "That little girl learned to survive in a world that wanted to destroy her. That little girl became a monster. That little girl became powerful." Margaret raised her pistol. "Last chance. The drives. Over my dead body," Ruby said. "That can be arranged." The gunshot echoed through the basement like thunder, but it wasn't Margaret who fired. Jackson Reed stood behind her, a smoking pistol in his hands and a look of absolute resolve on his face. Margaret crumpled to the floor, her own weapon clattering across the stone. 30 years, he said quietly. 30 years I've been hunting these people. I'm not stopping now." The two tactical operatives raised their weapons, but Ruby was faster. 2 shots, fired with the precision of someone who'd been planning this moment for decades. Both men dropped. "We need to move," she said urgently. "More will be coming." They ran through the basement corridors as shouts echoed from above. The council had found the main entrance and was flooding the hotel with personnel. Amelia could hear at least a dozen voices, all coordinating with military efficiency. The tunnel entrance was clear, but as they prepared to descend, Ruby grabbed Amelia's arm. "Wait," she said. "I need to finish this. Ruby, we have to go. You go. Take Jackson, take the drives, get them to Agent Webb." Ruby pulled out her cell phone and a small device that looked like a garage door opener. "I'm going to make sure the council never recovers from tonight." "What is that?" "Insurance policy. I've had explosive charges placed throughout this basement for 20 years, waiting for the right moment." Ruby's smile was grim. "The servers, the archives, the equipment, all of it is going to disappear forever. You'll die in the explosion. I'm dying anyway, remember? Cancer. 6 months at most." Ruby pressed the detonator into Jackson's hands. Get to Forsyth Park. Give Webb everything. Make sure the world knows what these people have done. Ruby, go! Amelia and Jackson plunged into the tunnel as Ruby's voice echoed behind them, calling out to the council operatives who were flooding into the basement. Hello, children. Looking for something? They ran through the darkness, guided only by Jackson's flashlight and the sound of their own panicked breathing. Behind them, they could hear gunfire, short, controlled bursts that spoke of professional combat, then silence. They emerged from the tunnel, just as the explosions began. The ground shook beneath their feet, as charges detonated throughout Lancaster Manor's foundation. Windows blew out on all 3 floors, and smoke began pouring from the basement vents. The hotel's elegant facade remained intact, but Amelia could see that the internal structure was collapsing. My God, Jackson whispered. She did it, Amelia said. She destroyed everything. They drove to Forsyth Park in Ruby's sedan, both of them still in shock from what they'd witnessed. The historic square was nearly empty at 11:45 p.m., just a few late-night joggers and dog walkers moving through the shadows cast by the park's ancient oak trees. Agent Marcus Webb was waiting by the fountain, exactly as promised. He was younger than Amelia had expected, maybe 45, with the lean build of a long-distance runner and eyes that missed nothing. You must be Ruby Lancaster's associates, he said as they approached. Ruby's dead, Jackson said simply. Died destroying the council's base of operations. Webb's expression didn't change, but Amelia could see the calculation behind his eyes. What do you have for me? Amelia handed him the backup drives. Everything. 40 years of files on every target, every operative, every operation. Financial records, surveillance footage, communications intercepts. Everything you need to dismantle their entire network. Webb examined the drives with the careful attention of someone who'd spent his career building cases that had to be absolutely bulletproof. How do I know this is authentic? Because, Jackson said, Ashley Morrison is going to try to have us killed before morning, and because the hotel that just exploded on Victory Drive contained a basement full of evidence that corroborates everything on those drives. The Lancaster Manor explosion? I heard about that on the radio driving over. Webb looked thoughtful. Any casualties? Several council operatives, Amelia said, and Ruby Lancaster, who sacrificed herself to destroy their archives. Webb's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression grew grim. I just received a report that there was an attempt on the life of David Martinez in Chicago about an hour ago. 2 men tried to break into his apartment, but CPD responded to a neighbor's 911 call. Both suspects died in the resulting shootout. Amelia's knees went weak with relief. David's alive? Alive and in protective custody, which means Ashley Morrison just escalated this from conspiracy to attempted murder of federal witnesses. Webb smiled grimly. Ms. Foster, Mr. Reed, I think you just handed me the case of a lifetime. What happens now? Jackson asked. Now I spend the next 6 months building indictments against every name in these files. Federal prosecutors will be working around the clock, and FBI task forces will be making arrests in all 50 states. Webb looked at the drives again. This is going to destroy careers, topple governments, and rewrite American political history. Good, Amelia said simply. As they walked back to the car, Amelia's phone buzzed one final time. A message from an unknown number. You've made a serious mistake, Ms. Foster. The council has resources you can't imagine. This isn't over. AM. Jackson saw her expression. Ashley? Making threats. Amelia deleted the message. Let her try. She's about to discover what happens when you threaten a woman who's already lost everything and has nothing left to fear. 3 months later, Amelia sat in the renovated library of Lancaster Manor Hotel, rebuilt and reopened as the Ruby Lancaster Memorial Writers' Retreat. The insurance money from the explosion had been enough to restore the hotel's upper floors, and bookings were already coming in from writers who wanted to work in a space with such a remarkable history. The basement remained sealed, a memorial to secrets that would never again see daylight. On the bookshelf beside her desk sat a leather-bound guest registry, the original from Ruby Lancaster's hotel, recovered from the rubble. The last entry, written in Ruby's careful handwriting on the night she died, read simply, Some secrets are worth keeping. Others are worth dying to expose. Choose wisely. The federal trials were ongoing. Ashley Morrison had been arrested at her Atlanta office, along with 127 other members of the council's network. Senator Morrison had resigned in disgrace. Judge Beaumont had been impeached. Chief Justice Hamilton had retired, for health reasons. The conspiracy that had controlled American politics for 40 years was finally dead. Jackson knocked on the library door, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a satisfied smile. His book about Ruby Lancaster and the Council, tentatively titled The Last Secret, had already attracted the attention of several major publishers. "Any word from Agent Webb?" he asked. "The trials are going well. Convictions across the board so far." Amelia accepted the coffee gratefully. "He says Ashley Morrison is trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the evidence is too overwhelming. She's looking at life without parole." Good. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset through the library's tall windows. Outside, Spanish moss swayed in the evening breeze, and the sounds of Savannah's historic district drifted through the air. Tourists laughing, carriage wheels on cobblestones, the distant sound of jazz from a riverfront club. "Do you ever regret it?" Jackson asked. "Taking on the council. Everything that happened?" Amelia considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, she'd been a divorced librarian with $47,000 to her name and no clear direction in life. Now she owned a thriving business, had helped expose the greatest political conspiracy in American history, and had found a sense of purpose she'd never experienced before. "No," she said finally. "Ruby Lancaster spent 40 years hiding from the monster she created. I'd rather spend the rest of my life making sure monsters like that never have the chance to hurt anyone again." Her phone buzzed with a new message, but this time, it wasn't a threat. It was a reservation request from a mystery writer in New York who wanted to spend a month at the retreat, working on a novel about corruption in small southern towns. Amelia smiled and began typing her response. The Ruby Lancaster Memorial Writers' Retreat was open for business, and the secrets of the past would finally give birth to the stories of the future. Outside, the shadows grew longer, and the old hotel settled into evening quiet. But the ghosts of Ruby Lancaster and Iris Beaumont were finally at rest. Their long war ended at last. And in the library where it all began, Amelia Foster began planning the next chapter of her own story, one written without blackmail, without fear, and without the weight of deadly secrets. The last secret of Ruby Lancaster had been revealed, and the truth, as always, had set them free.